Hey everybody out there, this here's John G, and I have a special on Amazon called Living Large. It's a stand-up special. It's funny. It was shot at the Comic Strip Live in New York City. You're gonna love it. You're gonna see me at my biggest. See, a few weeks ago, I had a heart attack. So if you don't wanna go watch it because I'm funny, have some pity on me. Go watch my special. Anyway, I'm not gonna be so big anymore. No more living large. I gotta lose weight. They want me to take off pounds. I don't wanna take off pounds, I love food. But anyway, go watch the special. It's gonna be funny. And I don't know how much longer I gotta live. I'm wearing this defibrillator thing. I don't know what this thing does. Supposedly it shocks me if my heart stops. My heart stopped years ago. Anyway, John G, Living Large, Amazon. Go check it out before I'm not here to watch.
Good evening. Do you like to laugh? Are you at one with the haha? Do you like your comedy coming over the streaming medias? If so, then go directly to Amazon right now. Do not hesitate and download Jim Andrino's Not Dead Yet. Recorded live at the world famous Comic Strip. It is a giggle-a-second fun fest. An hour of me for you. Jim Andrino's Not Dead Yet. Available only on Amazon.
Looking for something new to watch? All Media TV, the home of independent content. Subscribe now. Get your free 7-day trial. Order in and binge watch one of our series. Laugh, cry, or crawl under the blankets with a variety of shorts and features. Subscribe now. Get your free 7-day trial. Watch anywhere, anytime, any device. Go to www.allmediatv.com today.
Hey everybody out there, this here's John G, and I have a special on Amazon called Living Large. It's a stand-up special. It's funny. It was shot at the Comic Strip Live in New York City. You're gonna love it. You're gonna see me at my biggest. See, a few weeks ago, I had a heart attack. So if you don't wanna go watch it because I'm funny, have some pity on me. Go watch my special. Anyway, I'm not gonna be so big anymore. No more living large. I gotta lose weight. They want me to take off pounds. I don't wanna take off pounds, I love food. But anyway, go watch the special. It's gonna be funny. And I don't know how much longer I gotta live. I'm wearing this defibrillator thing. I don't know what this thing does. Supposedly it shocks me if my heart stops. My heart stopped years ago. Anyway, John G, Living Large, Amazon. Go check it out before I'm not here to watch.
Good evening. Do you like to laugh? Are you at one with the haha? Do you like your comedy coming over the streaming medias? If so, then go directly to Amazon right now. Do not hesitate and download Jim Andrino's Not Dead Yet. Recorded live at the world famous Comic Strip. It is a giggle-a-second fun fest. An hour of me for you. Jim Andrino's Not Dead Yet. Available only on Amazon.
Looking for something new to watch? All Media TV, the home of independent content. Subscribe now. Get your free 7-day trial. Order in and binge watch one of our series. Laugh, cry, or crawl under the blankets with a variety of shorts and features. Subscribe now. Get your free 7-day trial. Watch anywhere, anytime, any device. Go to www.allmediatv.com today.
From New Media Comedy Worldwide Studios, New Media Comedy Worldwide presents Comedy Legacy Series with Jim Mendrinos. And now, your host, Jim Mendrinos.
Hello, everybody. This is Jim Mendrinos. Welcome back to the Comedy Legacy Series. We have got a fantastic guest in store for you today. One of the more politically active, one of the more intellectual comedians out there. A gentleman who just takes and embraces new technology, and somebody that we can all serve to learn so much from. Sit back, relax, and let's spend this next hour getting to know Mr. Ted Alexandro. All right, so this is really exciting for me because we're bringing in somebody who is one of the comics on my top 10 of most respected, both on and off stage. There's a whole lot of comics that make the top 10 on stage, a whole lot that make the top 10 off stage, but to make it on both is amazing. And in an odd way, you're also one of the people who inspired me to do this podcast, Mr. Ted Alexandro. Thanks for coming in, Ted.
Appreciate it, man.
And I want to talk about that to start, because you've been very vocal in the community of comedians and helping out fellow comedians, you know, right down to Comedy Coalition when you were involved in that. But you did something that changed the way I looked at comedy way back. I don't know if you'll remember this, but when Greg Giraldo passed, you wrote, it was a Facebook post talking about what he meant to you and about the passing of a maestro. And it got me thinking from reading that how sad it was for comics that weren't going to get to learn from those comics that pass on. You know, and then recently when we lost William and Angelo and Vic back to back to back, that came home and it inspired me to do something about it. So you changed the way I looked at losing somebody and made it less personal and more communal for me. So thank you. But I wanted to talk to you.
Thank you.
Well, I wanted to talk to you about your dedication to the community, because you've always treated comedy, and you and I have disagreed on things in the past as well, but you've always treated the comedy community with respect, and you've always tried to strive to make it better as a community. Why do you think it's important for comics to work together to do that?
Well, I think, over the course of our careers, we spend so much time with one another, and we spend so much time in the workplace, various workplaces, but it's kind of a fluid totality of what we do, that those relationships become, a brotherhood, sisterhood, kind of familial in nature. So I've always been of the mindset that if something is problematic or something doesn't sit well with me, whether it's in family, friendships, one way that I can communicate that you matter to me, that I value my relationship with you, is to bring up something that's bothering me. So, whether that was with the coalition or various things throughout the course of my career. And I think it's a muscle that you develop too, because it's not always easy to do, but I think hopefully people receive it in the spirit that it's intended, which is to say, I think we can do better. I think I'm having a problem with this specific area, and I would like to talk about it with you.
Mm-hmm. One of the things I love it, and I want to talk about the community aspect with you. I want to talk about activism with you, because you're very active as well in comedy and you blend the two of them together. But I want to start with where it all starts, and that's craft, because you write more than most comics ever dream about writing. You're always working on your stuff. Can you talk us through your process of how you develop your material?
Well, I would say that, again, over the course of a career, and, I've been doing this 27, 28 years now, uh, that morphs over time. But what I would say for me, it was rooted in the discipline of sitting down to write. Um, so, you know, I tell young comics or anyone who asks, really, and I also remind myself of this, that when you're writing, it's important to shut off that part of the brain that is critical, that hypercritical type of voice that can, uh, derail you from actually completing what you set out to do. So, in the beginning of any endeavor, I think it's really important to be kind to yourself, to be gentle, to be supportive of yourself, and give yourself a period of time where you're figuring it out, and that's really ongoing. But especially in the beginning, I think it's important to remind yourself that you are to be commended and applauded even for starting the journey. But to your question specifically about writing, I would sit down and write in the beginning, a couple hours a day, not every day of the week because I was also teaching, I was doing, going to school, I was doing other things. But I tried to do that multiple times a week, maybe three or four. And again, don't edit it, don't criticize, just get it in your notebook, get it on your laptop, and then you can go back and start to look. And most of it is not going to be funny, most of it's not going to make the act. But what you're really doing is familiarizing yourself with the way your brain works. You're familiarizing yourself with your technique, your voice. So that's an ongoing process, but it's important to approach that in a disciplined manner.
Now, discipline is a place where you and I agree, wholeheartedly. One thing that you do so much better than I could ever hope to do is you have a musicality to your act. You have an almost symphonic structure to when I watch you do long sets. You're one of the comics that I love watching do a long set because you're not just charging for that crescendo, you're taking the audience on a journey, which almost feels like, classical music or jazz in terms of the construction. How much attention do you pay towards that construction? Or is that something that just developed in the course of your style?
I think it's a combination of the two. I am aware of it. One thing that I like to do, and I started to try to do early on, is examine everything that you do. And again, I'll tell newer comics this. Examine everything that you do. Examine the way you walk up on stage. Examine the way you take the mic out of the stand. Examine the first thing that you say. Is it always the same? Examine, everything should really be over time again, because in the beginning you're just like trying not to freak out up there.
Yeah.
But over time, it should really be more of an examined approach to claiming the space, and that kind of speaks to what you're talking about. Like I wanted to kind of claim the space in a way that you're also communicating to the audience that I am comfortable, I'm in control here, I know what I'm doing. And there's a lot of ways to convey that. So for me, I think part of it was my nature, part of it was the comedians that I kind of gravitated towards, their energy. So I think for me, it was not so much about volume and, over time. In the beginning, I was probably a little bit more, I'm still physical, kind of I pick my spots to be physical. But in the beginning, I think I was using physicality, in ways to kind of compensate for my lack of confidence in the beginning. So yeah, all of that, over time, to your question about musicality, I studied music in college. I studied jazz piano. So I think I was informed by a lot of, the jazz approach. Not that that's one thing, but, I would say if anything, it's what that reinforced for me is having the foundation of all of the basics and having, knowing all of the, you know, making sure that you're rooted in the simple kind of things that then you can over time maybe do an offshoot and meander. And I never used to do that in the beginning on stage. I was very much scripted and written and stick to the beats. But over time, that improvisational thing would come in where I could feel my mind wandering on stage. And I don't mean wandering in a bored way. I mean wandering like a thought would come. And I learned to follow that. Like, oh, let's see, this is interesting. And you start to honor that. And that, again, comes with being comfortable on stage.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the physicality because you have one of my favorite bits. And like with all comics, our favorite bits of another comic probably isn't your big closer. But, my favorite bit of yours is watching you do the gym bit where you're talking about the imaginary jump rope. And every time you do that, I'm standing at the back of Gotham laughing as hard as humanly possible because not just the bit itself, which is on its face funny, but the incredulous looks you get from the audience as they're trying to put it together. But what I love most about that bit is your commitment to the physicality of it. And it's just so subtly the way you're turning your wrists as you're doing the imaginary jump rope. How much of that is scripted and how much of that is just evolution?
Well, thanks. Yeah, I think some of it is kind of inherent to the way that you use your body, the way that I had done a lot of acting in high school and college, so I was used to being on stage. I was used to acting. So I think I brought that skill set to stand up when I started. But I think, again, like the comics that I really liked had a silliness and an ease, because when you have physicality or even a subtle facial expression, you can add layers to a joke. So I think that was something, I had pretty early on that I think was just part of the way that I communicate on stage. So yeah, like that kind of slow motion, and then the best thing, well, I don't want to say the best, but a great thing in any joke is when you're getting laughs and you're not saying anything.
Yeah.
So, like if I'm acting out, like jumping rope and doing this, like, and I'm crossing over and then I'm like waving it above my head and the crowd's laughing. And, there's a real joy to that, they're taking the ride with you. And, so I've always been kind of aware that you can add layers without saying anything.
Now, you talked about your influences, and everyone kind of studies people when they're getting set to start. And I know for me, a little bit older than you, so I studied people like Freddie Prinze and Robert Klein. That was the class that I learned from. Who were the comics before you got into this that inspired you to want to give this a shot?
Well, I would say, from a young age, my parents had albums like George Carlin, Class Clown, Flip Wilson, The Devil Made Me Do It, Cosby's early albums, so like I spent a lot of time listening to those growing up. But then, like when I was in high school, the Eddie Murphy phenomenon hit, and he was just like a rock star. We hadn't really seen anything like that before. His combination of stand-up and SNL, obviously, and then movies. So yeah, it was kind of cool to be, like in my adolescence, coming of age when Eddie Murphy was such a phenomenon. So I think that made an impact too. That stand-up was cool. Steve Martin too was another guy in my like elementary school years that like people were, like it was like that currency of like trading the bits with friends who knew the album or the kids. It was kind of like a circle of friends who knew the comedy album. Then as I got older, guys like Stephen Wright, Seinfeld, as his show became a phenomenon, and every episode began and ended with a stand-up set. So I found myself like studying these people. I would go to, I'm sure you remember the Museum of Television and Radio.
Oh yeah.
like pre-YouTube, we would go there and watch. I think you could take out like 3 at a time.
Yep.
And I would watch Richard Pryor's first set on The Tonight Show or Steve Allen or whatever it was. And I really, I made it a point to study those people, like you. I mean, I loved stand-up. And one thing that I tell this to comics as well, I would watch it on mute, kind of speaking to what you were talking about earlier, because when you watch someone on mute, you're really watching the way they comport themselves. You're watching their face. You're watching where they pause. I think it's it's a good learning tool to watch. If it's an hour special or whatever, obviously, sections of it. But watch the way people, because we're communicating the whole time. We're communicating in the silences. We're communicating when we're speaking. So I think that was a helpful tool for me to watch. Obviously I would watch it first with the audio, but watch it also on mute and take notes and kind of see. Things will jump out to you that maybe would not when it's paired with the audio.
Now, carrying on that a step further, because I deconstruct my sets. When I watch it, I listen to them, I tear them apart, I go through it. I'm sure you do the same with some of yours as well. Do you ever do that step with yourself, where you listen to it without the audio?
I do, yeah. Sometimes I'll watch my own sets, and now it's even easier, like with with cell phones a lot of times, right? Like things will come on, and you have to press it to get the audio going. So sometimes now it happens by accident, but yeah, I would do that. I almost, in the beginning, I found myself, and maybe again, this was like my jazz background of kind of like trying to find ways to flip things on their ear, to deconstruct them and then put them back together. I would take the jokes that I had written, and I would, as an exercise, say, okay, how would Sam Kinison deliver this joke? How would Jerry Seinfeld deliver this joke? How would Joan Rivers, whoever it was, like Red Fox, just think of because these are such singular voices. Maybe I could discover something in it, because these people have so mastered their voices and their instrument. Maybe I could find a new beat in it by delivering it the way Richard Pryor would, or George Carlin, so deliver that, my material in their voice, or Stephen Wright, right? So somebody on the other side of the spectrum who's kind of contained, deadpan, dry. So yeah, I found those kinds of things helpful too, in finding my own voice.
Now, you're talking a lot about process, and you've talked about deconstructing your set. You talked about hours spent writing. In, just balance, how much would you say the work off stage to the work on stage? Is there a ratio for you? Like, I know for me, if I'm doing an hour, if I do 4 hours of stage time this week, I've probably done about 20 hours of prep off stage before I got on. Do you have a balance that works for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's almost like a series of different, there's like different compartments that you're bringing to the stage. So one is, like you said, the writing and the amount of time that you spend writing and getting the material the way you want it. Then there's the performing it, which is a totally different thing. And you can find moments in there that were not on the page, or were not like what you expected. Something just comes to you, or like you said earlier, like a physical accent. For me, I don't sit down and write, here is where I turn the jump rope or whatever. That usually comes out in the performance. And I always say too, if they're laughing, it's really the crowd giving you permission. They're saying, we're with you. They're giving you permission to keep going with that. So that was something I learned too. Don't get off the laugh so quickly if something physical can extend it or accent it. But to your question, the thing that I think sometimes gets neglected that is an important component, maybe the most important component, is how are you living your life? You know, what are you? How are you taking care of yourself mentally, physically? What are you reading? What are you watching? What are your art? What is your artistic diet? You know, are you allowing yourself to be inspired by life, by other artists, by other disciplines? So, you know, I think, you know, like when you arrive on stage, um, you're bringing all of that with you. You know, you're not just arriving like and flipping a switch and you become a comedian or a person. You know, all of that informs what you bring to the stage. So to me, that's important. You know, just first of all, as a human being, to have a life that has some shape and some you know, curiosity and interests, but also, you know, it has the added benefit that it infuses your performance with a point of view and conviction behind what you're saying, and you know, so all of that type of stuff. So I think the life that you live off stage, you know, it's a rather simple idea and probably evident, but you know, all of the things that you're doing off stage really imbue your performance with all the layers that make you who you are.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, one of the things I adore about watching you work is you're not afraid to show your intelligence. You're not afraid to bring your references, your education level on stage, your opinions on stage. We've had conversations in the back of clubs where we've been watching a particular performer who's dumbing it down for the crowd, to just put it that as nicely as I can. And I know it's a pet peeve for me, and it seemed to be a pet peeve for you in that conversation. Why do you think so many comics are afraid to show their intelligence or afraid to show the full depth and breadth of their humanity?
That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe it goes back to what I was just saying, that they don't really have a conviction. Either they don't have a conviction behind what they're saying, or they do have a conviction and they don't want to share that with a crowd because they feel as though it might divide the crowd, or you know, they'll lose a portion of the crowd or whatever. You know, anytime that I kind of delve into something socio-political or, you know, social commentary, I've thought about it so much off stage that I know exactly how I feel. And, you know, you develop the muscle of sharing those things on stage, because that's a different muscle than just knowing how you feel about something. Making it funny is, you know, that's another step. But yeah, I think, you know, maybe some people, you almost have to like have done like the hours of debate, if not outright debate with people. You have to have done your homework. You know, when it comes to, I always say like you're hitting a smaller target when it's something political or something, you know, social commentary. You're hitting a smaller target than if you're just talking about dating or, you know, going to the gym. Those things have a pretty wide target. You're not going to offend anyone, most likely. So yeah, I guess, you know, it probably just has to do with that for some people that, you know, it's an easier road when you play it safe, you know, and that's different for everyone. Some people are just drawn to, you know, silliness or whatever. It's your personality, whatever you're into.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about the political side, because you approach politics in a much more unique way than I've seen other comics approach it on stage. Most comics go up there and they are very partisan when they're talking about politics, both left and right. My side's right, your side's wrong. You don't attack it as a political issue. You tend to attack these topics as human rights issues and frame it in right versus wrong as opposed to left versus right. Was that a conscious choice in your writing, or was that, again, just how you work as a human being?
Probably more the latter. That's kind of how I'm wired.
Mm-hmm.
for starters. But then as far as for comedy, I like a good debate and stuff like that. But on stage, it's not really the place for it. Not that I don't mind being prickly or kind of upsetting people. Again, once I know how I feel and I
Mhm.
have done enough work and reflection and had discussions with other people, because again, the target is smaller when you're talking about these things. So I have to feel confident in order to do it. But once I feel confident, then I don't have any trouble. And I'm not trying to get an applause break. I'm not trying to say, aren't these people stupid? I'm just trying to, you know, there's different kinds of laughs, right? So there's like the laugh where the whole room's laughing and there's no heaviness to it. And then there's a laugh where there is a heaviness in the room and people are maybe a little uncomfortable and they're leaning in and like figuring out like where's he going with this, and then there's a payoff to that too. So there's different colors and different payoffs to the way that you can explore things. But like I said, I'm not trying to be I'm not trying to get applause breaks. That's not really interesting to me. Um, yeah, I'm trying to do it because you know how it is as a comedian. We come up through, especially in New York. We're coming up through not only New York City but Long Island, New Jersey. We're coming through, if not divided rooms that skew red. So, like for me, I almost have to like bulletproof it so that that I can tell these jokes. I'm not performing in front of like 10,000 people that are there to see me. So especially when you're coming up, so you have to figure out ways to, again, I don't care if people like disagree with my ideology, but I don't want it to be in such a way that it's like heavy-handed and doesn't have a comedic payoff.
Now I want to talk a little bit more about politics because I was around before you started, and I got to watch you from a young comic to what you've become now, and you seem to make a shift in talking politics. You would always dabble a little bit. I remember some of the stuff you were doing post 9/11, which was incredibly funny. But your passion seemed to grow to talk about political things and talk about activism around the time of Occupy Wall Street. Is it you grew into your confidence? Is it you finally couldn't hold back any longer? Because you always had the muscle to do it, but you started flexing that muscle more at that point. What changed?
Yeah, I think it was, a gradual process of growing up and becoming the man that I was becoming, the person, the comedian. Um, yeah, because like, when you're starting to, as a young man coming out of college and stuff, uh, at least for me, I wasn't terribly engaged with the world. I would say, I was raised in like a left-leaning household, progressive household. But as far as like politics and stuff, it wasn't like those were the kinds of things that I really was passionate enough to bring up on stage. Occasionally, like you said, it might find its way into the act one way or another. I would say that 9/11 was a shift point for me, as it was for many people, just in terms of like, asking more questions, thinking about the world. It kind of there was such obviously a gravitas to that um, just to continue doing what you were doing pre 9/11 almost felt hollow. So you had to kind of, if you didn't bring it to the stage, at least you were reflecting on these things. And then, yeah, like you said earlier, getting involved in activism, both like organizing the comedians and then Occupy Wall Street. All of these things for me are intertwined.
Mhm.
And in a way, kind of go back to one of the first questions you asked about relationship, So, whether it is the micro relationship of one-on-one, a club owner, a fellow comic, whatever it is, or the macro relationship of citizen to government or to the system. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of inclined to ask questions or to dialogue and say, I find this problematic, and as a comedian, to do so in a way that lands, as a joke.
And for me, one of the things that I love watching most about you is the amount of respect that you bring to both sides of an issue when you talk about it. You don't just, these people are dumb, they're stupid. You get your point across. You get your point across that you think they're wrong, but you get your point across in a way that allows people humanity and dignity. And you also do that off stage. I remember, talking to you, Russ Mead, with the Comedy Coalition, and you guys disagreed with a point I made, and you talked it out with me, and, Russ was a little more vocal in his feelings, but you were always the type that approaches that. Now, again, it's, kudos to not only you as a person, but your parents for bringing you up this way and giving you that ability. But it's so easy to just point fingers on stage. It's so easy when you're behind a mic and a light to just go, I'm right and you're wrong. Yet you've avoided that. And how did you avoid it is the first thing, because most comics don't. And it's become a cornerstone. I watched Stay at Home Comedian, and even there, with some of the comments that were popping up, the amount of respect that you always show people with the differing viewpoints in your comedy and in your personal life is staggering, and I think it helps to make you a better comic. So how are you able to cultivate that?
Thanks. Yeah, I would say that my parents were key in that. My parents are two of the most loving, respectful people that I know, and genuinely care about people. And so that was something that was instilled in myself and my four siblings. So and what I'll tell you what, when I fail at those things, as I have many times, and specifically in comedy, when I fail at that, or I get into it with an audience member, or I lose it, or those sets where things don't go the way you want, I drive home or get on the subway feeling disappointed in myself, unless it was unavoidable. But the times that I had a hand in it, I feel really disappointed, So over the years, you kind of, I think I've kind of learned like how to avoid that, and to come with a spirit of, I guess, love, but certainly of accepting that, not everybody's going to feel the way I do. But again, if I know how I feel, I think there's value in that, because especially in this time where it's almost a time of real kind of wishy-washy. People are calculating, is it worth saying this or that? Is it worth getting involved, whether it's Black Lives Matter or anything else? Is it worth, it's easier to stay quiet, right? So for me, there is a value in kind of unequivocally saying like, this is what I think, and not that I'm gonna shit on whoever disagrees. I don't like to be combative unless I think the situation calls for it. If someone is being hurtful directly or intentionally, I have no problem asserting how I feel in that kind of situation. But I don't want to be the one to initiate like a combative dynamic, because I don't think it has to be combative just because you are talking about something that you're passionate about. Because as you said earlier, like we're all human beings, and like we all have people, even in our families, who we literally love that we disagree with. So, I don't think it has to be this this absolute kind of polarization of separating into camps.
Yeah, what I've always enjoyed about you when I watch you talk to people who have a different point of view is you listen. It's like you're waiting for them to say something that will change your mind, and that's, I think, that curiosity that speaks to your curiosity as a comic, which is one of the key components I think you need to be a comic. You have to want to know more than you know right now.
Yeah, I mean, is there a better moment in life than finding out you didn't know something or finding out you were wrong? I mean, it's a little humiliating at times, but there is like something beautiful about like, oh wow, I didn't see that, or like I didn't have enough perspective. That's like a really kind of graceful moment. Great, is that the right word? Yeah, it's a moment of grace that you kind of someone shows you something that you were missing.
Yeah. Now, I want to talk specifically about your relationship with comics, because down to a man, whenever I teach a comedy class and I send students to go watch you because you're one of the comics I send, and I go find out what Ted's playing and go watch them. They go watch them, and they go and they come back, and two things happen. One, they tell me I was right and they learned so much watching you. But the number two thing is they go, so I approached him after the show and he talked to me for 10 minutes and he gave me so much advice. And you're so open talking to new comics where you don't have to be. Let's be a little bit honest here. You've done your specials. You've been on the late night shows. You're touring places like Madison Square Garden and Radio City Music Hall. I hope that gig still happens for you. All of these things that you're doing. So you've paid your time in the trenches. You could just, pack up and go to the next club like so many other comics do. But yet you still take the time to talk to the younger comics and to give them advice. Is there a reason why?
Well, I mean, one would just be basic kind of humanity and being kind to people. Two would be I love comedians. I love comedy. So as I'm sure you recognize yourself in someone who's just starting out, and you can kind of see their eagerness or their desire to kind of get better. So yeah, I love talking comedy. So if I'm able, if I'm not running home for some reason, I'm always happy to share a little wisdom. And the last thing would be that people did that for me. I remember, like David Tell giving me some kind words when I was starting out, and giving me saying a compliment and saying that he liked something I did. And you know how that is. That something like that can keep you buoyed for a year.
Yeah.
So yeah, like for me, it's a combination, and maybe also my teaching background. I like to impart whatever knowledge I've accumulated.
All right. I want to talk about knowledge you've accumulated, because you did something that I view as probably the most remarkable thing I've seen a stand-up do. During this pandemic, you turned around and released a comedy album that everyone should go and watch on YouTube right now if you get a chance. In pandemic, stay-at-home comedian, recorded, no audience, didn't even try and hide the fact that it was an Instagram show, and you kept it vertical and not horizontal. I mean, everything everyone tells you for your entire career, don't do this. And you did it, and did it successfully. What was, that takes you understanding your audience. And I want to talk to you a little bit about knowing your audience, because you do, between your podcast and what you're doing online. But it also takes, too, an amount of craftsmanship in the way you constructed that. And, you had some particularly heavy moments with some real human moments. Your bit about, trying to get your baby to nap because your wife and I want to have, just a moment to watch the last few minutes of Tiger King, straight down to moments of silliness where you're doing Cat Stevens songs. It's all there, and it's blended, and it's artistically and expertly blended. How much thought did you put into that? Did that just develop? Bring the thought process behind that, because that's absolute genius.
Well, I really appreciate that. That was like one of those unplanned kind of fun moments of inspiration. Because as the pandemic started and the stage was eliminated as a possibility for all of us comedians and performers, like so many people, I took to live streaming on Instagram. And because of the heaviness of especially the early stages of the pandemic, and everything was so new and so bizarre and so uncertain. um, I think it was kind of a lot of things coalesced for me. Like I had been podcasting for a year and a half. I've been a stand-up for many years, and live streaming as well has become another outlet. So I felt like I had all of the tools I needed to process these things in real time. So when I started doing it, it wasn't with the goal of making a special. It was really just a chance to still perform and connect with people. But as I was doing it on a nightly basis, I started to see in the comments, and that was the other kind of cool thing, despite the fact that I wasn't looking out at an audience, I was seeing a steady stream of comments. People would say, hello from Chile, hello from Ukraine, hello from New Zealand, Australia, Indonesia. And there was something night after night that was kind of heartwarming, and a sense of being bound together through this pandemic that was hitting everywhere. And then I said to Matthew Weiss has directed my specials and edits my podcast. So we collaborate on a lot of stuff. So I asked Matthew, I said, I think if we take the best moments of these live streams, I had done maybe, 14, 18 of them, hours and hours of stuff. I said, I think if we kind of make a kind of a tongue-in-cheek comedy special, because obviously it has none of the bells and whistles of a comedy special, but I think this has merit beyond the ephemeral nature of live streaming, because especially with Instagram, it's there for 24 hours and then it's gone. But I was recording them so that I had the library, and then Matthew put it together and kind of stylized it a bit. And the next thing I knew, the New York Times was writing about. There was a big write-up in the Times about it. So it was just another lesson that, in this bizarre business where you're doing stuff for decades, this thing that I shot in my apartment on my phone was what the New York Times wrote about.
Yeah. And two things that I really loved about it. Number one was it was a hopeful tone. There wasn't any of the, my God, the world is ending because of Corona. You kept it to a hopeful tone. And two, what I really enjoyed about it is you did bits. You were doing stuff about your kid. You were doing, stuff about being home. You were doing stuff about the world and the state of what we're in. But it wasn't all Corona all the time, which is what on Zoom shows you're tending to get right now. You made conscious choices to go beyond. And I think that's part of what makes you special as a performer. You acknowledge, you certainly acknowledge that this was done in pandemic and that you wished you were outside, but you didn't harp on it. You found the positive to it. And with so many comics structuring their act of, you could almost take the core phrase of most comics acts as, this sucks, here's why. And you don't do that. You have a much more positive approach. Was it always that way? Did you start out with the typical comic mindset and then evolve? How did that come about for you?
That's an interesting point, and I think there is kind of a pervasive pessimism, because pessimism becomes cool, and hopefulness can be seen as uncool or Pollyannish. So I would say by nature I'm an optimist, and it's strange because in a way I think anyone who endeavors to do stand-up, it's such an optimistic act to get up in these kind of dire situations all the time and share your thoughts. It's a very optimistic act. in and of itself. But yeah, I think that is my core, and that kind of informs so much of, I'm not, even though my last special was called Senior Class of Earth, it was kind of a wink towards all the doom and gloom and the situations we find ourselves in. But yeah, it's almost, I think about the blues a lot. The blues of being like I think comedy and the blues are similar in that you take something that is problematic or disappointing or real gut wrenching, and you try to turn it into something that you're going to laugh at, or something that maybe can be a joyous experience.
So I want to talk about, because you've literally done everything that every stand-up wants to do. I mean, you check all the boxes. Performed internationally, check. Performed in, large-scale arenas, checked. Done late-night spots, check. You're on special, check. You've checked all the boxes. Theater tours now with Jim Gaffigan that you're doing a lot of. How's the prep different for you? How's the prep different when you're gearing up for a late-night spot as opposed to when you're going to do a full-length special? Is your process of preparing for those things differently?
A little bit, because now I kind of trust myself, and I trust, I've done these things before, so there's fewer unknowns, there's fewer like variables of things that I haven't experienced before. And even if something does come up, you're more equipped to kind of roll with it, or even see if you can turn it into a positive, So, but when you're starting, yeah, you're kind of so focused, and you're almost focused to the point that you can't enjoy the process, and that's it's a natural thing, of course. When you're beginning something, you're in your teens or 20s, whenever people begin. But for me, it was in my early 20s I was beginning. So I think just as a human being, you have less tools in your toolbox of how to cope with whatever comes up, let alone performing experience. So now I'm just much more able to enjoy whether I'm opening for Jim somewhere, and a lot of times it'll be at an NBA arena, an NHL arena, 10,000 people, 12,000 people, But it's funny how over time, like walking to that stage now is really not different than when I was walking up to the comic strip stage. There was that nerves and excitement, but I know I know what I'm doing, so it's not I'm not like paralyzed by fear or anything.
Now, that phrase, I know what I'm doing, that is a benchmark for all comics, because we go on stage and like most comics start with imitation. They try and sound like a comedian and then eventually develop your own voice. But there seems to be, as I'm having these conversations with comics, that moment where they knew that they could do this. They knew they had the skills to do this. Do you remember when that was for you, when you felt comfortable, like, oh, I got this?
Yeah, I would say it was pretty early on, because again, I had done so much performing, whether it was acting, I did a lot of musical theater, I played the piano, so I was, I played the piano in bands or in school theater groups and stuff. So performing in public was not a hurdle for me. So once I kind of got an act together and wrote some jokes, I would say within the first year or so, like I felt like, I think I can do this. Like I was getting laughs, and I think I was figuring it out still, obviously. But yeah, I felt confident that I could do it. I would say maybe, I mean, who knows for sure, but I do remember like maybe 10 years in feeling like, because there's a difference between getting laughs and being a competent performer, a competent comedian, and kind of knowing who you are, knowing your craft. Again, like I said, having been through a bunch of experiences, whether it's doing a festival or being on television or all the things that we do, you have enough of those accumulated, then it kind of harkens back to what I said earlier about like that's what you're bringing on stage with you. You're bringing all of that so that when you set foot on stage, and it's not even conscious, you're communicating to the crowd, I know what I'm doing. I've been here before.
Yeah. So for me, and I don't know if you had the same experience, I wouldn't be where I am in my career if I didn't have a lot of veteran performers reach back and fill in holes in my education, point out things that I should have seen. I can remember, coming off stage at the comic strip, and Barry Berry, who at that time was one of the big acts there, grabbed me and won, "You wrote this joke wrong. Let me show you how to do it right." And showing me elements of craft that I might not have otherwise known. Who were some of those comics early in your career that kind of extended themselves and showed you some of the pieces that were missing for you?
Well, the first guy who comes to mind is a comic who was kind of a legend on the Long Island scene. His name was Jim Myers. He did a character, Klaus Myers, where he would do like the first 5 or 10 minutes of his act as kind of a German character, and then he would shift and like let the crowd know. I mean, he was such a great mimic too. People didn't know, and then he would shift and say, "No, I'm Jim Myers actually," and like he would kind of take the veil down. But he was somebody that was kind of a local legend out on Long Island. When I would kind of split my time between the New York clubs and the Long Island clubs, because I grew up in Queens, so I was kind of halfway between both. And when I started in the early 90s, there was a thriving comedy scene out on Long Island. There was 3 or 4 like legitimate clubs out there. So I saw Jim, and he came up to me and said, you've got something unique, you've got something different, and introduced me to his manager, who became my first manager. So that was like one of the biggest things, just in terms of like, I was just kicking around open mics and not really knowing even what I was doing in terms of, I didn't have a plan of the business, but he opened up the business for me in terms of that. And then, like, I would say touring with other people, like I was touring with Lewis Black for a while, Craig Ferguson, Louis C.K., which obviously, things have changed since then. So I look at it a little through a different lens, because I realize, being a male, that perhaps I didn't have an experience that other people might have.
Yeah.
So that was disappointing. But having said that, all of those people taught me, and Jim Gaffigan, obviously in recent years, these guys taught me like what the next level looked like in terms of fame, having a fan base, doing your own show. All of them had their own shows. So yeah, it was like, in comedy, you almost kind of fall into these different apprenticeships where you don't even necessarily realize it, but you're doing an apprenticeship, like with Jim, where I'm watching him do an hour and 10 in front of an arena, or even just the time off stage, talking to Craig Ferguson, and a guy who had a nightly talk show for years. So you just glean so much about life and about the business. So yeah, I feel fortunate that I got to learn from all those people.
All right, now let's talk about balance, because you've also been so balanced in terms of having a life. Wife, kid. Not a ton of scandals. You're not one of those guys that was out partying until 6 a.m. I think in the time I've known you, I've had 3 wives, and you're on wife number 1. You know what I mean? So you've always had balance as a human being. Does that help you with your comedy?
It's interesting you use that word, because that's a word that is important to me, and has kind of been a through line in my life. I think part of it comes from the fact that I did have members of my family with mental illness, so that there was some imbalance, so that maybe I took on the role at times of being the balanced one. So I think maybe part of it is who I am. Part of it is kind of learned survival behaviors. But I think it's healthy in general to have balance, and it's not really encouraged in comedy or in the
No.
arts. Like, or you can have this rock and roll lifestyle where you're drinking every night, and you try to hook up with this person or that person. But yeah, like I guess the balance side of me, like when I was first starting to headline, I fell into a little bit of the traps of like drinking every night or going out with the wait staff and doing shots and stuff. But I kind of quickly realized that was not for me, and it was kind of imbalanced and not ultimately helping me do the things I wanted to do. So yeah, I guess it kind of almost speaks to what I said earlier about the life that you live, and that's going to inform like what you bring to the stage. So balance is important to me, and if I feel imbalanced in any way, over the years I've become pretty attuned to knowing, like this, you're kind of like you're kind of off track, no matter what it is, if it's physically, if it's just the way I'm living, the things I'm doing, I'm pretty attuned to kind of self-correcting, or now, having a spouse that helps too, if she sees it in me too. Yeah, so I think balance is very important.
Beautiful. Time is flying by, and I only got time for one more question because I did promise I'd get you off at a certain time. So I want to ask, we both have the benefit of being able to look back over long careers. What do you wish you would have known starting out that you learned during your journey?
I think the thing that it took me a few years to realize, and I think this was specific to the fact that I grew up in New York, in Queens. I didn't move here. So I had my family, I had my circle of friends dating back to even childhood friends that I was still in contact with. So when I first started in comedy, I was very much like a punch the clock, kind of go do my set and get the hell out. Like I wasn't, I think again, because of the fact that I was from here, I didn't look at it as like a social scene. It almost took me 5, 7, 8 years to realize like, oh, these are my friends, these are my coworkers, these are people that I'm going to be kind of journeying through life with, because in the beginning, like I said, it was more like just do my set, and maybe part of it was like not wanting to, like being maybe shy or nervous in the beginning, like because you walk into a club and you see all the veteran comics, and you see, so kind of like maybe like a meekness of like I'll just do my set and get out. Yeah, so it took me years to realize like I'm part of a community, like, and the friendships that you have and the people that you start with are really going to be part of your life journey, So I did figure that out eventually, but I wish I had real. Again, I don't blame myself or younger comics, because when you're trying to figure out how to do stand up, your mind is so like full already, and you're so like overactive, just trying to like, even just walking into a comedy club when you first start is such a weird. You're like, am I even like, do I even belong here? Like, I'm a comedian. So yeah, there's a lot to kind of parse through when you're starting. But the one thing that I do wish maybe had occurred to me a little earlier is that these are my people and my friends, and we're starting a journey together.
Yeah. Well, it's great, and thank you for always being so positive, not only on stage, but off stage as well. Comics can learn so much, not just about comedy from you, but just in terms of a good way to live your life. And it's always nice when I get to point to somebody who's a good human being and go, he's also amazingly funny. That's a nice combination. We there's so much more I would love to talk to you about at a future date. I want to talk to you about the web series that you did, the Teacher's Lounge. I want to talk to you about some of your specials because there's some specific learning moments. I hope you'll be my guest in a future episode again.
Yeah.
And until then, where can people find you? Where would you like them to go to follow you?
People can follow me on social media at Ted Alexandro. And I actually have a new album and special coming out this Thursday called Cut Up. So people can find that. It'll be posted on my Instagram, Twitter, tedalexandro.com. But that is coming out. It's called Cut Up.
By the time this airs, we'll be able to post all the links for it too. So great talking to you and have a great time. And I can't wait to see you back on the stage and in a club.
I appreciate it, Jim. I always love talking to you and always love watching you work as well.
Oh, thank you so much. All right. And we will be back shortly. There is just so much we can learn from Ted. So many things that he touched on, so many elements of craft, to have that dedication to not only being, proficient as a comedian, but also to marry your own personal voice, your own political voice, and to try and do more with your comedy than just entertain. That's something we can all learn from. We're going to be back next week, and we're going to have another great episode. In the interim, if you want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to our YouTube page. They're archived over there. You could also download the podcast, and you can listen to all the previous episodes wherever you get your podcasts from. But while you're there, please leave us a comment and a review. That would be so helpful to us. On behalf of everybody involved in today's podcast, Mr. Ted Alexandro, the creative team here at New Media Comedy, and myself, Jim Andrinos, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
This has been a New Media Comedy Worldwide production.
Thank you for watching the Comedy Legacy series. New episodes air every Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern on New Media Comedy TV YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Hey everybody out there, this is John G, and I have a special on Amazon called Living Large. It's a stand-up special. It's funny. It was shot at the Comic Strip Live in New York City. You're gonna love it. You're gonna see me at my biggest. See, a few weeks ago, I had a heart attack. So if you don't wanna go watch it because I'm funny, have some pity on me. Go watch my special. Anyway, I'm not gonna be so big anymore. No more Living Large. I gotta lose weight. They want me to take off pounds. I don't wanna take off pounds. I love food. But anyway, go watch the special. It's going to be funny. And I don't know how much longer I got to live. I'm wearing this defibrillator thing. I don't know what this thing does. Supposedly it shocks me if my heart stops. My heart stopped years ago. Anyway, John G, Living Large, Amazon. Go check it out before I'm not here to watch.
Good evening. Do you like to laugh? Are you at one with the haha? Do you like your comedy coming over the streaming medias? If so, then go directly to Amazon right now. Do not hesitate and download Jim Andrinos, Not Dead Yet. Recorded live at the world famous Comic Strip. It is a giggle-a-second fun fest. An hour of me for you. Jim Andrinos, Not Dead Yet. Available only on Amazon.
Looking for something new to watch? All Media TV, the home of independent content. Subscribe now. Get your free 7-day trial. Order in and binge watch one of our series. laugh, cry, or crawl under the blankets with a variety of shorts and features. Subscribe now. Get your free 7-day trial. Watch anywhere, anytime, any device. Go to www.allmediatv.com today.